Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on post-pandemic predictions. Today we will be discussing the impact of COVID-19 on talent management practices in Australia. My name is Kimberly Hubble and I am the CEO of Hudson RPO in the Asia Pacific region. For those of you who don't know Hudson RPO, we are a global talent solutions specialist, and our mission is to help drive your organisation's success through finding, hiring, onboarding and retaining the best fit talent for your business. Joining me today on our webinar are three of our valued clients. Firstly, Phil Rutherford, Regional Resourcing Lead for ANZ at Macquarie Group, Kimberly Elliott, Human Resources Director for ANZ and Fiji at Ecolab, and Isidore Payne, Head of HR at ANZ at Bayer. So hi guys and welcome.
Hi everyone.
Hello.
Okay, so as mentioned, the webinar today will be discussing Hudson RPO's post-pandemic predictions report. If you haven't read it yet, please visit our website listed on this slide to download it. However, before we jump into the discussion today, I thought it would be helpful just to position some of the key findings from our report to frame our discussion today. Okay, so here are our top 8 predictions. First of all, what worked online will stay online. We believe virtual recruitment practices, including video interviewing, online reference checks, online assessments, online offers, are here to stay. We have also seen companies evolve quickly to conduct onboarding online very successfully. Also, we've seen companies in the training and conference space move those training and conferences online with great success, reflecting what is a fairly common practice in other markets such as the US and around the world. And lastly, the rise of the virtual team meetings and virtual team social events using Zoom and Teams has been highly successful. Our second prediction is the rise of the gig economy. Employers are wanting more flexibility and control over the costs of their human resources, and they're progressively opting to use temps, contractors, and freelance workers to keep their resource costs flexible. We believe this trend will continue as both organisations and the talent themselves opt for this approach. Prediction 3 is spotlight on internal talent. Now, as hiring freezes took hold during COVID and state and international borders were closed, many companies placed a stronger focus on internal talent to fill critical vacancies, sometimes promoting employees to roles before they were ready or before they would have done under normal circumstances. We believe this is a great trend and we believe that's here to stay. Our fourth prediction is acceptance of full flex spectrum. Now, what we mean by that is more than just a general acceptance of remote working practices, but a general commitment to fully flexible working hours and conditions to cater for the different needs of employees. This may include flexible start and finish times, enhanced part-time work options, extra annual leave, job sharing, and compressed work weeks. Most importantly, full flex options are not just for parents homeschooling children or those caring for elderly parents. Full flex is for everyone. And from our research at least, flexibility consistently ranks #1 for talent attraction and retention. So again, we believe that trend is here to stay. Our fifth prediction is around the importance of positive experience. With many HR practices becoming virtual literally overnight, we saw extra care and attention being paid to candidates, new joiners, and existing employees to ensure they felt connected, cared for, supported whilst working remotely. We believe this hypercare for employees, and particularly new joiners, is a great trend and is here to stay. Our sixth prediction is that transparency will lift employer brands. Now, most of us have experienced far more communication from our leadership teams during the pandemic, moving from monthly or quarterly business updates to sometimes very granular updates multiple times in a week. This has been really critical in ensuring employees feel confident of the way forward for those organisations. We believe this corporate transparency has reached a new high during COVID, and it will have a lasting positive impact on how employees view their employer. And it will position these organisations very effectively to attract and retain talent in the future. Our seventh prediction is around workplace tech being on the rise. Now, in some cases, many of us already had this tech. We had Zoom, we had Teams, but maybe we weren't using it effectively or consistently. We have definitely seen a rise in online collaboration tools such as Teams and Zooms, and an increased use of social media channels such as Yammer or Workplace. Other tools such as Trello, Basecamp and Monday have also been used to enable teams to work remotely but collaboratively on important projects. Again, that trend will continue. Our final prediction is about discretionary spending frugality. Most corporates have found creative ways to save money in order to keep as many people employed as possible. Savings on travel, accommodation and entertainment were a natural consequence of lockdown. But there have been some flow-on impacts to savings in rent, office operating costs, office supplies, training and recruitment. We believe it is unlikely that organisations will return to pre-COVID budgets in many of these areas. So we believe that frugality is going to be here to stay. Okay, so they were our key predictions from our post-pandemic predictions report. Given we want to maximise our panel discussion today, I'm going to jump in and ask our panellists some questions. Now, I'm going to be asking all panellists 3 questions. Firstly, how has COVID-19 changed your talent management practices for the better? Secondly, what have been some of the more challenging aspects of COVID-19 on talent management? And thirdly, what changes do you think are here to stay? Now, once we have discussed those questions and time permitting, we will open the floor for some Q&A. Okay, so let's get started. So our first question is, how has COVID-19 changed your talent management practices, including recruiting, onboarding, employer engagement for the better? And Kimberly, I'm going to hand to you first.
Thank you, Kimberly, and welcome to my home, where I have been working since mid-March, along with my 2 teenage daughters that I normally share this workspace with. In terms of the impact on recruiting, we were already well down the path of digital recruiting, and we're recruiting most of our, in fact, all of our roles across the ANZ region and Fiji from our Sydney-based offices. So we had a high take-up of remote interviewing. So I think we made that transition fairly smoothly. However, the real advantage became access to greater talent pools as the need for geography started to slip away, and we began to realise that we really could start to work long term in a more remote way. We've had greater access to bigger talent pools that aren't as restricted to geographic bases, and I think that's something I'm very interested in keeping an eye on how that progresses moving forward.
Great, that's really interesting. How did you get your hiring managers to kind of come around to that point of view that talent can literally be based anywhere?
I think we're still on a journey, and we've definitely got managers far more accepting of that than others. A large portion of our associates already work remotely because their customers.
Well, it looks like we may have lost Kimberly. Isidore, I might just hand to you then. So from Bayer's perspective, Isidore, what have been the positives from you on your talent management practices?
And thanks, Kimberly. I think, I think similar to what Kimberly spoke about, let me not focus on that, but I want to focus on maybe on engagement, which is quite interesting. I think engagement actually improved during this period. And why do I say that? I think we were fortunate as Bayer across all our divisions to be doing well, and we didn't have to stand people down, all etc. But as you spoke about, the focus on communication, the focus on wellness programs, the focus on managers checking in one-to-one, resilience training, the flexibility in terms of, well, you can work from home. We understand you've got 2 kids on your knees. We're flexible in terms of your delivery. I think all of that resulted in quite a positive, in my mind, dynamic. I think what we get feedback is that people are saying, well, you actually care about us. I think it's quite a big positive for us in the sense that let's take a few learnings from that going forward. Apart from all the other things we did in terms of what Kimberly mentioned. I think also a larger pool of candidates available out there that's more experienced than we had in the past. So those are the 2 things I want to make mention of.
Yeah, and well done on the timing of your resilience training, Isidore. Was that training that you already had in play, or did you do that specifically in response to COVID?
Interesting, Kimberly. We had it in play, but we had it face-to-face. So we moved that offline, and my OD manager is saying now to me that, listen, we're going to keep it online because why? It's 10 modules and it's 2 hours per module. So now we can engage across our sales forces, we can engage everyone, and we can package the program in different ways and forms to accommodate all of our ANZ people when it suits them. So we're not going to go back to classroom training. Very interesting.
Yeah, great. Now, Kimberly, I think we just lost the last piece of your answer. So do you want to just finish off?
Yeah, thank you. I was commenting on onboarding and saying that for us, that was probably one of the biggest challenges. Our systems and processes were well set up for a very centralised approach. And I think for the first time, this really gave us that opportunity to partner more with line leaders and really share that accountability for more successful onboarding.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think we've definitely seen, even within Hudson RPO, a far more streamlined and positive experience for new joiners. So I think that's been a consistent experience for many of the clients we've been talking to. Okay, so Phil, over to you. What have been the positives that you've seen?
Well, welcome to Macquarie at 50 Martin Place virtually today. I thought I'd share the office space with you that many of us haven't attended for quite some time. It's been a challenging 5 months, lots of positives and some negatives, and problems to work through. Collaboration with people internally required that maybe didn't collaborate as much before in the office, and they've had to do that in quite creative ways. We had a strong flex working culture before COVID, but obviously this has been a major extension of this, and probably to the point that none of us expected, obviously. We've also been really focused on equipping our leaders and our people with all of the tools to try and navigate. And we had some of the tools, like Kimberly mentioned, possibly they weren't being utilised as much as they could have. And we've certainly had to move to that quickly. So I just thought I'd run you through, just from a recruitment and onboarding perspective, some of the quick changes that we had to make. So I think we got to the 17th of March and literally everyone was out of the office across or globally pretty much. And so we had to quickly transform graduate and lateral hiring. Graduate recruitment for all businesses that do grad recruiting was right in the middle of grad hiring season and event season on campus. We had to move our graduate events immediately to virtual events, working closely with the universities. We looked at our team and repositioned our recruiters across different businesses where we had greater demand. So in our retail bank, where we had increased demand in our customer focused areas and operations areas. So we were able to move our recruiters around very flexibly. Face-to-face interviews immediately went to video interview, and that was for both one-on-one and for group interviews as well, which is an interesting one, having 3 or 4 people at different locations on video, particularly for the candidate. So we had to keep the candidate in mind about what that experience might feel like for them. So we developed during this time a number of communications and guides and materials to share with our hiring managers and our candidates to get them comfortable with what this new virtual experience felt like, and some of the things that they should focus on going into a virtual interview, for example. So we found that we had to develop that fairly quickly to get people to a point where they were comfortable with that full virtual experience. We transitioned our assessments, which were traditionally always done in the office, to an online offering, which has been a big plus. And all of these things have contributed to increasing our speed to hire, or speed to complete hires, which has been a great win for us. And we've had managers providing feedback that they're really happy with the way the process has worked. Their people have been virtually onboarded relatively seamlessly throughout the process. They received laptops via courier. They're all set up on day one. And another area that I just wanted to mention, which was a good one, we had other organisations approach us during the time that particularly the airlines, for example, were impacted, and we were able to help with redeploying some of their people who were impacted during that time in short to mid-term contract work. So that's been a real success story as well. We've also refocused our employee referral program as well in certain areas where we've encouraged our staff to refer people from their network who might have been impacted through COVID as well. So it's been able to allow them to refer people, great quality individuals into certain roles for us. The other big, and then the final one I wanted to mention was the whole logistics issue, and Kimberly touched on this as well. What do you do when you're all out of the office on a Wednesday and you have 50 people starting on the following Monday, and that needs to be virtual? So what we now have is we had to ensure that the physical aspects were set up for candidates, that they were very comfortable with what remote recruitment and what remote onboarding or pre-commencement would look like, and day one, what that would look like, and who would contact them and what induction would look like. So it was an interesting experience. We now that we're nearly 5 months in, we have a large population of people who have been completely recruited and onboarded, have never been to our office, and are working virtually. And that's something none of us have ever experienced before. So as we start to slowly return to the office, which we are at the moment, we need to focus on that and consider that people have never been to the Macquarie office and haven't met their team members and others in the organisation.
Yeah, a lot of great changes there, Phil. How do you think the hiring managers and candidates have adapted to, say, online interviews as an example?
Look, there's been lots of positive feedback about how quickly we can move through the hiring process. So I think that's a positive. I think the clear sentiment throughout, though, both from candidates, hiring managers, and our recruiters as well, is that you can't replace the people contact, and that people are eager to get back into particularly doing final round interviews. They like to, before that decision is made. We've had a lot of feedback that, as with some of our offices are opening now, we're moving back to doing those final interviews at final stage, face to face. So we don't think that can be replaced. So we'll probably land somewhere in between the old and the new, we think.
Yeah, great. And Isidore, you mentioned that you have seen an increase in employee engagement during COVID. Is that sort of more anecdotal feedback from employees, or is that done through your engagement survey? How do you kind of tap into that?
Thank you. And we did a short survey of our people in terms of around COVID itself. It was actually a global survey, and the feedback anecdotally was very positive. And I think especially to the communication part and also the caring, the programs in place to care for our people. So it's anecdotal feedback, and also talking to our people. It's just amazing. What we do find now is the second wave in Melbourne, in Victoria. And that is sort of quite interesting in terms of how do we deal with that, because where does the employer support stop, because where you get to a stage where people now get really, really into a space where I can't really cope with this, and what do we do then? So I think the first phase was quite okay, but there's a phenomenon in terms of the second phase seems to me that's quite a bit of a different ballgame. And how do we keep and maintaining our people to be on board there and to keep resilient? I think that's quite interesting to mention.
Yeah, I agree. I think certainly from our perspective, one of the positives is that although we are working remotely, I personally feel almost a closer sense of engagement with my leadership team, although they are based all around Asia Pacific, China, Singapore, Hong Kong, and right through Australia. I think because we are making that effort to connect face-to-face on Zoom and Teams, it kind of does make you feel a little closer rather than just doing the catch-ups by phone. So I think that's been definitely a positive. And the same with our, all of our on-site managers, them connecting, using those tools to really keep in front of people. And I think it's really been helpful, as particularly as we go through this second wave, to check in on people's well-being, to be able to see their face and watch their body language. So like most people, we are sticking very, very close to our people and, providing access to resources and assistance should they need it. And we've certainly seen that at different times of this whole, period, some people have been, affected early on. Some people were affected, now and not before. It's about keeping connected to the individual and how that individual is coping personally. So it's certainly we're seeing an increased need for our leaders to be very, very empathetic and sensitive to those nuances at an individual level.
An interesting story, Kimberly, we changed our performance management system last year, and the first question we ask now in check-ins and performance is, how are you? And that's quite different in the sense, and I think COVID has now resulted in the first question you ask when you open the Zoom or Teams or whatever, how are you? And I think this coming to play into, I think we're on the individual first, and then we go to the KPI and the task. Quite interesting. Yeah.
Very nice way to do it. I think in general, my observation of employers in Australia is that we have been very, very good and supportive of our employees, very trusting. I think we trust that people will work remotely and do the right thing by their organisations. And I haven't necessarily seen that same level of trust in other regions. So, I'm sure we've all read the horror stories about some companies overseas employing spyware to spy on their staff to make sure they are working, and terrible stories like that. But that has just not been the experience here in Australia. I think by and large, Australian employers have supported their employees, have really shown a genuine care. And I think most employees will reflect on this and think fairly positive things about their employer during this quite challenging time. Okay, so we might move on now to our second question, which was, of all of the changes that have had to happen, what have been some of the more challenging factors for you to overcome? And Kimberly, I might hand to you first.
Yeah, I think in keeping with the theme around communication, one of the biggest challenges I think we've found, being a geography across Asia Pacific, is staying attuned to the changes that were happening so quickly in every market that you're operating with, and making sure that you had a very geographic specific message for your associates around what those changes meant for them. So if they were moving into lockdown, if they were unable to travel, if they were unable to service clients, for example, there was a level of granularity that I became somewhat obsessed with, following relevant government sites and being able to build that confidence in our associates that we were taking care of them and were familiar with the nuances that were unique to their market. And then kind of being able to build your sensitivity to their unique circumstances. So, obviously for us here in Australia, we're watching what's playing out in Victoria, whilst at the same time we've had the very recent outbreaks in New Zealand, and being sensitive to that very different tolerance levels around at what point governments are responding at what level of infection rates. And it is very different, and you need to be very sensitive to that because they both generate the same level of anxiety for your associates. And I think, we're used to in our organisations having very macro messages, very overarching messages that you communicate to all associates. This really required you to get down in the detail and to build the confidence that you were in their market, understanding what was happening and supporting them on the ground.
Yeah. So I completely agree with that, Kimberly. What have your senior leaders done? I mean, how are they communicating? What types of tools are they using? What is the regularity of that communication to your workforce?
Yeah, we do all leader meetings once a fortnight to go through a range of topics, from kind of commercial performance through to key people issues. We're having supply chain meetings at least twice a week, so we can be ensuring our supply businesses that we are able to still produce and deliver to our clients. And then we also have fairly regular virtual town halls with all of our associates as well. So I think back to one of your very earlier points, our rhythm and cascade of communications has really picked up pace and momentum and is very well received.
Great. Okay, and Isidore, what have been some of the more challenging aspects for Bayer?
Yeah, Kimberly, thank you. A few topics. I think first and foremost, getting top talent to move. I think we get our TA team is getting the question, can I be reassured about job security at Bayer? Because why should I leave my position? And there's many people in the market, but those people who tap on the shoulder is really a little bit more hesitant to step out of current roles, which is, I think, quite interesting to observe. To add to what Kimberly was saying, also our leaders in communication, we divested our animal health business to an American company, Elanco, and 1st of August they started with Elanco. It was quite strange to say goodbye to our colleagues in animal health without saying goodbye, because we could not do the normal town hall and the big party in the city. It was quite weird, and it's like, I think that's sort of, and then the third point there is for our leaders to keep, because we're quite quick now, we lead remotely. Our leaders equipped, so suddenly to be able to, and I think the first 2-3 months is okay, but now on an ongoing basis, how do I keep connected and keep motivating and keep engaging my teams to a level that I think that's a new skill set, and we're absolutely working on that to say, let's enable our leaders and up that skill set, because this is going to be with us for, I think, the future.
What have been some of the challenges you've seen in leader communication, Isidore?
I think it's the variability in that, and it's the trust factor. Some leaders are just naturally trusting people, and I think that's where we need to bring to a certain standard that all leaders need to understand. We step off from a basis of trust, and let I call it, on the same category in that sort of age bracket where we sort of, this is quite new, and I think for us, really getting some of the more conservative leaders to really start thinking about new ways, and to say, wow, when we start designing the future of work, which we are doing, what is that going to look like, and how are you going to engage, because there is going to be change for you as well, and how do they react as individuals to that change? I think that's quite interesting to see.
And you mentioned maybe a little bit of nervousness with candidates about making a move from existing company across to Bayer. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you may have done to try and give those candidates greater confidence to move?
Yeah, I think in Bayer, obviously, we were very lucky, as I said in the beginning, to be in a very solid business performance. I think first and foremost, people want to know that we are doing well. And across our divisions, crop science, pharma, and consumer health, it's really going well for us, and we're blessed in terms of that sense. And really, our EVP now, Health for All, Hunger for None, it's a great purpose, and we try and use that now quite effectively. And so come and join a great company with a great purpose, and we've got some great things to do in terms of solving big problems in the world. So really amp that up and to say, yeah, if you want to have some purpose in your life, come and join a company with purpose. And we played quite hard on that, and you're going to play more and more on that purpose. So I think really important. I think generations now want to be associated with a company that's more than just the average who want to join a company with a purpose.
Yeah, I think definitely agree there. We've seen across all of our different clients that this hypercare that we've been talking about extends to candidates going through a recruitment process, that understanding how they are uniquely positioned at the moment, what they are dealing with at home, what are their fears in terms of making a move, that kind of, although that's always important, I think it's definitely been escalated right now. So we're finding there's a lot more time and attention being spent to handhold candidates through the recruitment process to ensure a successful outcome. Okay, now Phil, over to you. What are some of the challenges that Macquarie Group have faced?
Look, similar challenges to what the others have outlined. One of ours that's probably slightly different, being a multinational company with head office in Australia. We do quite a bit of internal mobility to other locations and then bring Australians back. We also do quite a bit of global hiring as well. So that's been impacted throughout COVID, certainly with border closures and restrictions on visas, which continue now in Australia. So very difficult to bring anybody in who's non-Australian, as you know. And as mentioned as well, the different countries all at different stages, and being a global organisation, how do you keep up with that, with different teams working across borders, some are out of the office, Asia 3 months before us, now going through a second wave. But what we've been able to do is learn from what they've done as well. So it's had pros and cons. So we've been able to work through those challenges, but it's certainly been there. You mentioned the individual before. I guess that realisation about how has the pandemic impacted our people generally and our teams, but also very much focused on the individual within the team and the individual needs. So it's been a real focus of ours to make sure that we recognise that everyone has had to go through different professional and personal adjustments during the time as well, and they continue. Changes in parents and carer responsibilities. People needing flexibility in very different ways. Workplace and living arrangements not ideal for people. So lots of things that impact the individual, which then feeds into the team, and often teams that have not met each other because of being hired during COVID. So they all come into challenges. And then the final part for our team, in the talent acquisition space, we've seen a big uplift in applications, inquiries, which has increased the amount of work for recruiters. Although we're doing a lot of virtual activity with interviews and things, the just sheer volume of applications is significant. Lots more email traffic. We've seen an uptick in marketing from new technologies to address the virtual workplace we all find ourselves in. So I'm sure the others as well, have received numbers of inquiries about, can we sort out your video interviewing or your virtual onboarding, and here's a new technology. And they're all great, but there's been a significant influx during this time, and it's difficult to sort through what could be beneficial and what may not be.
I imagine with a large recruitment team and many vacancies on the go at any one time, there would be a constant pressure to look at those vacancies, prioritise those vacancies, switch resources around. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you've navigated that, Phil?
Yeah, look, it was relatively seamless, actually. So I mentioned before we've moved our assessments to fully online instead of in the office, and we had people who ran those assessments, and so we quickly moved those people to another area to support a different part of the team. In terms of prioritising roles, there has been a lot of that throughout COVID, right from the start, and we're probably now on the upward curve now, in terms of volumes going back up again, and many of those are new roles, more so than replacement roles as well, so which is a positive. to be able to move teams around, we've got a lot of recruiters who have worked in a number of different areas before, and we make sure that we cross-train them and give them secondments in different businesses, and therefore they were equipped beforehand. But you know, certainly some people have ended up in roles that they probably wouldn't have imagined themselves to be as well. So it's been everyone's really received the change well, and everyone's really been involved in making sure that we can deliver.
Great. Certainly from Hudson RPO's perspective, I think one of the more challenging aspects for me and my leadership team has been staying really close to our clients to understand how their vacancies are changing almost on a daily basis, and moving our talent around to where they can have, you know, the greatest impact. And that really puts a lot of onus on sort of really granular day-to-day management for our leaders, but also ensuring our recruiters feel confident enough and, I suppose skilled enough to walk into maybe a new client that they've never recruited for and pick up and run with that, often at short notice, because we've seen, you know, at the various stages over the last 6 months, you know, great changes across clients and across countries and even across regions. So certainly the versatile recruiters who can turn their hand to recruiting anything have been really valuable during this period, because certainly we've asked a lot of our team and they've risen to the challenge. Okay, so there's some of the challenges we've seen. What I wanted to turn our attention to now is to think about, you know, all of the changes we've seen so far, and I'm sure there's still more to come, but from the changes we've seen so far, what of those changes do you really think are here to stay? And Kimberly, I'm going to ask you first.
Yeah, I think two things come to mind, Kimberly. One is for our long-term and permanent associates. Our leaders have been able to develop their kind of empathy muscle, I think, over the last 6 months. The fact that, you know, on a daily basis, they're conducting meetings with their teams in the intimacy of their home, with their family around them, whether there's young children they need to take care of, or in my case, teenagers that you're sharing a study with. There's a degree of kind of intimacy that we're sharing of our homes back into our workplaces that we haven't done previously. And I think that's really helped our leaders to kind of build their empathy muscle around what does a day in the life of our team members really look like, and how different they all are, and the unique circumstances that everybody brings. And I think that's hopefully something I hope will stay for the long term, because it's a real value add skill in our leaders' repertoire. The other thing is, in our organisation at least, because we have had a global headcount freeze, is the increased use of more kind of agile labour. So we're starting to look at how we step outside of the more permanent, fixed labour arrangements and look at where we can use more flexible, short-term, agile staffing arrangements. And that was quite new and unique for us. And again, you know, kind of a big shout out to Hudson for being able to partner with us on that, to be able to provide some of the payrolling and insurance services to ensure that we could make that happen. And I don't expect that our headcount freeze is going to move super quickly. Like all big organisations, we've made commitments to our shareholders around what our cost maintenance is going to be. And I think, again, this is, you know, a kind of skill and capability we're going to have to lean into harder as we think about more agile ways to staff for the future.
I love that term you used, empathy muscle. I think that's great. That sums it up for me. I think we've seen the same. I mean, when you're seeing inside somebody's home, you're seeing their kids, you know, potentially parents. You're seeing their everyday life, and you're seeing how different that is for different employee groups. I mean, you know, we have to remember some of our younger staff members may be living in share homes where they've got 4 and 5 other people, you know, and they're having to work out of bedrooms literally every day. So I love that term. That, you know, that to me crystallises what we have really needed from our leaders is to empathise and understand not everybody is experiencing this just like you are. Interesting point around the move to more flexible working options. So do you think that, again, that hiring managers are embracing those changes and understanding that, maybe moving to hire more temps and contractors is the way of the future?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it was a bit of a means to an end initially because of the frustrations we had with our headcount freeze. We were trying to look for some creative ways to work around that. But what the benefit that's brought is access to talent quickly. It's brought it in a way that has given us real agility in how we access that talent, how we think about kind of sharp and narrow talent skill sets that we might use for new unique roles rather than fully all-rounded associates. And I'm hoping that this is something we can carry forward as we think about our kind of talent strategies in the longer term.
Yeah, great. I think we're seeing that again across the board in Australia. Is interestingly, although permanent hiring numbers have been down pretty much across the board, our temps and contractor numbers have been fairly stable, and in fact in some clients have been growing. So that would echo what you're saying. And certainly we've been seeing that trend for many years, but it has been escalated over the last 6 months. Okay, so on to you, Isidore. What changes do you think are here to stay?
Thanks, Kimberly. I think 3 things spring to mind. I think first is technology. Now, let me first put my hand up and say we were lagging a little bit in this. And great kudos to the RPO team, Faye, and from Hudson, and our team now taking us step forward, step change in terms of live hire, automated reference checking, contract automation, digital onboarding. So really looking forward to the team to take us into that domain and lead the charge for us. So great to partner with you guys in terms of that. The second topic is, I think in pharma in particular, the landscape is changing around customer-facing staff and the competencies around what we'll be looking for in future. I think we are be looking for a combination of people that can do face-to-face and also use the digital part, and really what does that look like in terms of your workforce. And I think a lot of pharma companies will be asking that same question in terms of what talent are we looking for. The third part really is to Kimberly's point as well in terms of what is our EVP around flex and, work where you get the best outcome, but also find the balance between face-to-face because that's important for culture. I think those 3 things from me in our domain is really going to be quite important, and it's going to stay with us to say, let's develop a proposition on those things.
Isidore, what types of changes do you think around flex? I mean, what are you offering today, and where do you think you may need to expand your flex offering?
Yeah, it's interesting. We coined a phrase called flexibles 4 or 5 years ago already, and quite flexible, and we didn't want a policy because we said flexibles don't need a policy. But what we found is now with annualized wage and all these big topics, we have to formulate that a bit more. But I do think COVID is changing the dial totally for us. And so what does that look like? Our consumer health office in Basel in Switzerland, they went absolutely remote working, and you only come to the office now when you do work that requires face-to-face, and what does that look like, and give it the tag and give it a name. I think we'll go a similar way. We just need to be careful in terms of, and I just really think we should think through that in terms of face-to-face and culture. I think, what does that mean for team dynamics? What does it mean in terms of my association with my company and my team, etc.? So I think there's a balance in there that we need to find, and we haven't worked it out. So we are currently quite into the detail of that. So dealing with the logistics in terms of annualized wages and all of those things, health and safety, work from home, all of those policy related topics, but find also then the EVP part in terms of what is that balance we need to strike.
Yeah, certainly I think the remote working trend does raise really interesting questions about the role of the corporate office and, the role that it plays and won't play moving forward. Okay, Phil, so on to you. What changes do you think are here to stay?
I went through a list of things before. I think, as I said, some of them have been really successful, some of them not so. Some we will keep pushing forward, some we may step back, probably not right back, but somewhere in the middle. I think there's a lot of talk around adjustments to the employer value proposition in the market, a lot of discussion, a lot of webinars in the recent months, and potential change around the individual value proposition as well, in terms of that flexibility and their need for flexibility. So what hours do I need? What location am I going to work from? And therefore, how productive am I going to be in selecting that type of work? So it's about, what is the individual going to the proposition that they give back to the firm as well. So there's adjustments there, I think, that we will continue to see more discussion around. I think our people managers, with all of this change, may need to revisit how they manage, how they supervise, how they manage, and how they measure. Particularly with a team that might have a greater mix of contingent workers and permanent maximum term or fixed term. And for some managers, they may never have managed in that environment before. So that's going to be a real change, but also a challenge and possibly a big positive moving forward as well. And you mentioned before the office, probably the early days at this stage, but will the office be considered differently? Will it be used for a different purpose? Will it be a collaboration space on certain days or at certain hours? So there's a lot of discussion around that and what that might look like moving forward. So that will evolve as we start to go back and see what works for people and what doesn't.
Yeah, certainly interesting to see how those types of discussions evolve. Kimberly, are you seeing similar discussions that Phil mentioned around the role of the office for EcoAB?
Yeah, I have to say I've only been with the organisation for 18 months and got the job of returning everyone back into offices when we made the hasty retreat, and was very surprised to actually find the size of our footprint. We had offices in tiny little rural and remote locations, Townsville, Darwin, places in remote parts of New Zealand that were probably being accessed at best by 5 associates, on average often by 2, and it really highlighted that we were lacking a clear strategy around, to a kind of point Isidore made earlier, around for what purpose do you have an office, what role does it play, where does it fit in your service and overall kind of engagement strategy, and it's really become a significant piece of work we need to do pretty quickly, both because we're not seeing a huge retake up of access to our head office. We're probably running at about 10% occupancy at the moment, and I think this is a real opportunity. I think what's going to be interesting, though, is I have an expectation is that real estates are going to become probably quite cheap in this current market, as every company's doing the same thing. Yeah. So it's making sure you hold to your strategy, because it could potentially be easy to say, well, we can get real estate for cheap, so let's keep some footprints, when in fact it might be really missing that opportunity to really question for what purpose and how do you make sure you drive that strategy forward.
Yeah, we're certainly having the same type of conversations within Hudson RPO. We previously had a shared workplace in many of our key locations, and we would have our corporate support staff working from there, and also our on-site staff would come back there on a regular basis for training and award ceremonies and business updates. I think we are, like many, rethinking that strategy and the purpose and function of that space. I think for small to medium-sized businesses who are maybe working in collaborative workspaces already, they kind of have the best of both worlds. I think it's the larger corporates who have got very costly and extensive footprint that will see the most change. So it's going to be interesting to see where that ends up, for sure. And Kimberly, just around flex, are you already reviewing your flex work options, or has that work already been done?
No, I would say we were on the journey prior to COVID, and this has given us, like many organisations, that awesome catapult forward. The important piece now is working with our leaders to be clearer around this isn't temporary. this is how we will continue to operate in the future. And I think we've got leaders at various points of kind of acceptance along that journey. But I'm very passionate about, if we don't embrace this and embrace it very fully, we are really going to reduce our access to talent. I have as your research has already proven, this is going to be demanded by candidates, that we maintain this and we continue it in a supportive way. So it's just getting everyone aligned around that goal. And I think to some extent it's probably been helped by the fact that we haven't had a big take-up returning to our office. It's proven that it's the preferable way of working for the majority of our associates.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. All right. Well, I think that sort of finalises the more formal part of the webinar, but we are now going to have some questions from the floor. And we did get some questions during this registration process. So let me just get those now. Okay, so first question we have here is, what impacts are you seeing or expect to see around internal mobility, particularly given the evidence that Talon can potentially be located anywhere? So Kimberly, I might pass to you first on that one.
Yeah, this was a really interesting one, and it was driven very early on by our headcount freeze. So the fact that we couldn't go externally to source roles, we had to go internally and really look deep for talent. And I think it's been such a positive thing. It's really given leaders visibility to talent that they may not have considered in a first round, or it's also given leaders visibility to the development paths that they can put in place to get people ready for roles. And as a consequence of that, our internal fill rate over the last kind of 4 months has been the highest that it's been since we've been collecting the data. Geography, not so much. And I think, in fact, we've probably had some real challenges for our field-based roles because they do need to be based where the client is, and border restrictions have caused some significant challenges for us. I seem to spend a large portion of my day because trying to work through how we're going to continue to service with some border challenges. But outside of those roles, where the roles can be based anywhere, I'm hoping we can continue to get access to bigger talent pools within our own organisation across the geography.
And have you seen the trend of maybe internal employees being promoted to roles maybe even before they're ready?
Oh, absolutely. But not in a way that's negative. Like, I don't think we're not setting people up for success, but what we're doing is being more courageous and putting more support around these individuals. And it's, it's just in terms of the message it's sending to our organisation, particularly about kind of non-traditional career paths. For the first time, we're starting to get a lot more mobility from some of our head office roles into our customer-facing areas, and that is super positive.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about at Bayer, Isidore?
Yeah, I think, Kimberly, two things. We've seen that we're now able to, I think it's a win-win, appoint especially leaders outside the big cities. And I think that's a quite positive development for me, because think about lifestyle change, more affordable housing 2 hours away from Sydney. And we see quite a bit of uptake in terms of people moving. And I think that's sort of for us quite interesting. And we are open to that in terms of, you want to be a leader and be based in Newcastle, that's fine. We also see quite a move in terms of less need for expensive and disruptive expat assignments. We see that people, we just this week have an international role be based in Australia. That's interesting because technology-wise, I think post-COVID, if you think about technology and more limited travel, but still to be able to achieve face-to-face, I think we can get away from expensive expat assignments and find a middle way here. So I see these two things as quite positive for us.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting, you're seeing leaders, opting to move out of the big cities and into maybe more regional centres. And I think that is definitely going to be an interesting trend to watch, because we see that happening across other clients. And definitely, I mean, I think, we know of many people working here in Australia who are in international roles. And again, I think that if you take the view that it's the best person for the job, then really their geographical location shouldn't be a major influencer in many appointments. So I think those two things will definitely help with internal mobility. And Phil, what about at Macquarie? What's happening with internal mobility at Macquarie?
Yeah, look, we're mainly New South Wales based with smaller offices in a few other states. So in Australia, it's been steady, probably slightly up to where it was previously. And obviously where maybe people have been impacted, we've looked to redeploy. So that's been a positive thing. Globally, I mentioned before, has been strained, obviously, because of border closures, as mentioned. So where we've been able to, and the person has valid working rights in the location with, and they're in a global team, we've been able to have them commence roles that should be here in Australia or in other locations to commence those roles. I guess the question there is, if they can commence and start and it's working successfully, should that be how the role is and be offered fully remotely, as you said before? So again, probably too early to judge that at this stage. But yeah, as soon as the borders and the visa situation opens, I would think we will start again.
Yeah, certainly I think within the Hudson RPO business, we have taken the opportunity because we have had hiring freezes at various stages, and we've had a big focus on internal mobility and, as I said before, moving our talent around to those areas where they can add the most value. And that has worked really very effectively. We've also been promoting in some of our corporate functions people to new roles that we were trying to fill externally, but we've taken the option to give an opportunity for somebody to step up. And with the right support and guidance, I think that has been an effective strategy as well. So certainly echoing everything you're saying there. And, we've long had a view that in talent acquisition, doing internal mobility really well is just such a critical first step. If you're not doing that well, then it doesn't matter what you're going to do in the external market if you're not taking care of your existing employees. So we really, love the trend we're seeing here, and we do believe it's here to stay. Okay, now moving on to our second question from the floor. So we have somebody who is a contractor. So they say, "Hi, I am a freelance contractor. During COVID, I have seen an increased demand for my services, while many of my friends in permanent jobs have been stood down or made redundant. Are you seeing a general trend towards company using more temps and contractors? And if so, do you see this trend continuing?" Kind of already touched on it, but Kimberly, anything else to add to that particular question?
I expect this will continue, and I'm only going to look at what's happening in my own house. My kids are kind of now working 3 part-time jobs rather than one kind of full-time job. I think this is a little bit reflective of where the future of work is going in the early days of people's careers, at least. And I love the agility that it gives us. I love the talent pools it gives us access to, and I would expect that we will continue, absolutely.
Yeah. And Isidore, what are you seeing at Bayer?
Yeah, I think what we are looking at is, especially small and medium-sized companies will buy specialized skills on a user pay basis. And I think you'll find these specialized skills be quite in demand and be working for more than one company at the same time. So you can scale it up, you can scale it down. If there's systems involved, you don't own those systems, you don't maintain those systems. So it's quite appealing to me in terms of buy what I need in the market when I need it at the right price. So for me, it's something that's going to stay and quite appealing to those specialised contractors you mentioned.
Yeah, agreed. And Phil, what about at Macquarie?
Yeah, look, the numbers have been relatively steady. I think it's dependent on the work that's there or the projects that are there. And that's linked to contingent workforce as well. So as things obviously start to come out of the pandemic, we'll see a pickup there. And particularly around, as I mentioned before, areas that are customer facing, where we have significant increases. Retail bank, for example, we've been able to put large numbers of contingent workers in as well to support there, and some from impacted organisations, which has been a positive.
Great. Okay. All right. So I have another question. Thanks, everyone. Okay. Have you experienced any of your new employees who have been recruited and onboarded remotely who aren't delivering? And how are you managing this? So I might lead off there. So I think that, like most people, we haven't been hiring externally as often as we normally would. So I suppose the pool of people we have hired is small. And I'd say for those people, we have shown this hyper care to ensure that they are onboarded really effectively and they get that almost daily check-in support. So far for us at least, it's been good, and those new employees have settled in very nicely and are doing a really good job. So we don't have any of those people that are not delivering. Having said that, I think if we did see some people that weren't coping, then we have really good support networks and people that we can deploy to help them get through that. But so far, I'm pleased to say we've had a good experience. Kimberly, do you want to mention anything about this in relation to Ecolab?
Yeah, probably a slightly different variation on it. We had one or two associates who we were in discussions about their performance as we went into lockdown, and there was a preference by our leaders to halt those conversations. There was a feeling that in those extreme circumstances, people weren't conducting their normal business, so it really wasn't an appropriate environment in which to be assessing their performance. I think the interesting thing we've all learnt out of that is this is the new normal, and you can't indefinitely put things on hold waiting to get back to what it used to be. So we've had to learn how to pick up where we've left off, pick up our performance conversations, reinforce our performance measures, think about how effectively they apply in a more agile environment, and continue to kind of rebuild and not put things on hold. And I think that's probably reflective of a lot of people processes. We hit pause on a lot, expecting to go back and do them the way we did them before, instead of having to learn how to do them differently.
Okay. And Isidore, any other comments from Bayer?
No, I fully support what Kimberly is saying. Can't really add a lot. I think we also put a pause in terms of what we expect of our people. In the opening, I did say that it's okay if you're 75% performing, because we understand it's more important for us to keep you in your job right now. And we believe by doing that, we get it back in spades. And I think for me, that's a bit of a longer term view there. Yeah, we have the odd 1 or 2%, but will always be a bit lagging, and yeah, there's nothing wrong in picking up the slack there and sort of pull up the performance as needed.
Yeah, and again, this comes back to the empathy that our leaders are showing for our people and giving them that breathing space to adapt when everything around them is changing at the rate of knots. So, okay, we might just take another question now. How will travel restrictions impact global mobility? And what is the plan to ensure global talent can still be considered? Phil, do you want to maybe make a comment on this for Macquarie?
Yeah, look, we're still considering global talent where we're able to accommodate a virtual start with the view to having people start in, we don't know how many months' time, but to relocate at that point. We all need to be confident that that will happen at some stage and the borders will open, and we hope we get through this. So we're taking that approach. Where we have limitations, we do make that clear in our advertisements and our screening process with candidates as well. That potentially at this time, this may not be the right opportunity due to the restrictions we have in place. So I think it's all just about open dialogue, open communication.
Right. So you would be prepared to start people if their role was based in Sydney, but they're currently based in, say, London, you would be open to starting them in that other location until such time as they can come here.
Yeah, look, it depends on, it's case by case basis, depends on whether working on the other side of the day works in terms of hours, or you know, whether they need to collaborate for the bulk of their time on video and video communication with the team for most of the day. That would impact potentially the hours they work. So case by case.
Yeah. And is it all? What about for Bayer?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag. We have held back on certain roles coming from Europe because it's quite difficult. But we went ahead some roles coming from Thailand, for instance. But we have people stuck, or one senior leader stuck in Thailand for 6 months now. And so it's quite a challenge to make that work, because what do you do? And we made the decision to appoint him a role and to continue, so make it work. And we have somebody moving out end of the month into Korea. And that's working to outbound them from here into there. But it's to Phil's point, it's a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, yeah. And Kimberly, what about a Deco Lab?
Yeah, I think this is incredibly complex, and I don't think it's as simple as just what strategy you'd like to have within your own organisation. I think we're very much at the mercy of government directions, and I'm kind of managing expectations within our organisation that I expect, particularly in Australia, there's going to be a clamping down on the number of roles that will be available for inbound expats, and that there'll be a focus on ensuring that Australian jobs are given to Australians first and foremost.
Yeah.
And so even trying to manage expectations around anyone we might currently have on temporary visas, around the reality of that being able to materialise into PR in the future, so managing that, as well as managing the availability of pools moving forward, I think it's very complex, and we're really going to have to navigate it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I completely agree. I do think that we're already starting to see from some governments, particularly Singapore, a very clear directive that you have to show proof of how you have tried to hire locally before looking at expats, and they have put in many different hoops to get through to hire internationally, and that has strengthened over just the last week. I think in Australia the same thing. There's going to be a much bigger focus on proving that you have thoroughly explored the domestic market before you look externally, and we're all going to have to be prepared for that reality. So I kind of concur that probably over the next few years, global mobility and international hires, unless you're prepared to locate people and they do their jobs offshore, which has all sorts of tax and other, legal ramifications, it is going to be hard to just bring people into Australia like we did, only last year. So I think that's going to be a challenge for many organisations who are facing really extreme skill shortages, particularly in healthcare. Okay, so all right, we might just do one last question and then we'll give you some time back into your day. Okay, so do you think the pandemic and our new ways of thinking will see the creation of new job positions? For example, an empathy connector. That's an interesting question. Okay, so do I think that we'll see new jobs? I do. I think that we are seeing new jobs being formed on a fairly regular basis due to technology innovations, and things like AI are already impacting job descriptions, and that was here before COVID. I do think COVID and the move to remote working and some of the things we've been discussing today will eventually create the need for more online collaboration, facilitators. Although we haven't seen those roles come up yet, I can imagine that the move to remote will put more emphasis on those different talent communities, whether they are external or internal, and you will need somebody to be managing, refining, updating, and engaging with those communities. So, yeah, I think the answer is yes. I do see new roles. What they are like, probably we need to regroup in 6 to 12 months' time to see what has actually happened. But I think it's an interesting time and definitely one that we need to stay close to. Kimberly, do you have anything?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a great example for an organisation like ours is our safety roles have always been very much focused on driving, on accessing customer sites in a very physical safety way. Am I wearing my eye protection, my safety steel cap boots? In the last 6 months, safety has very much been around the aerosolization of, COVID in the air. What are we doing to ensure that, we've got safe workspaces in a way that the traditional safety person has never had to lean into and be an expert in. And I think that's just an example, and I don't think that's going to go away, as we all keep saying, until at least we have a vaccine with herd immunity. So the kind of safety skills and capabilities that's required in providing a safe workplace, completely different to what they were 6 months ago. Yeah,
absolutely. Good insight. Is it all?
Yeah, I think maybe before COVID, even look what organisations are doing, and in our own backyard. Don't want to single out Roche's on the line, maybe or not. What Roche is doing in terms of put the whole organisation design on its head, and your traditional executive jobs is not sitting around the table anymore. It's really team-based around a number of business focus areas, and Farmon focus this morning. It's quite interesting when you read about Roche is doing. So I think that whole self-directed work team thing, and how you collaborate within a team and with totally different roles. Take note, I think that's where it's going, and I think there's a lot been written about it. Cotter in Harvard is teaching about it in terms of informal and informal organization, and I think those roles are the ones of the future, and it's very much team-based, collaborative, and less in terms of top leadership, top down. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And Phil, any comments on new jobs?
Yeah, look, if I think about the HR space, or close to the HR and recruitment space, health and wellbeing, as people are working from home more, people focus on ergonomics and things like that. Big topic in the last few months, where we were talking about prior to COVID, a function that's kind of like a candidate care concierge consultant type person who would guide people through that onboarding process. And our recruiters have picked up that job during COVID, but it's likely that could be an independent function that makes sure that the setting up of the virtual onboarding process is all done. There's a lot of focus on transformation and change at the moment, and will continue as this evolves as well. So so I think lots of opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're all agreed on that. I think it's going to be interesting how this plays out over the next 6 to 12 months, and certainly lots of juicy topics to talk about in terms of the impact on our skills and roles. And so we might wrap up there. So thank you very much for joining us, everyone, and a very big thank you to our wonderful panellists. So Kimberly Elliott from Ecolab, Isidore Payne from Bayer, and Phil Rutherford from Macquarie Group. Thank you so much for your time. You've been very generous, and we do really appreciate it, and some great insights there that you've shared today. So just in wrap up, if this discussion today has prompted you to maybe rethink some of your talent management practices, whether it's recruitment, onboarding, or employee engagement, please reach out to one of our talent experts. You can see here, Nikki McCulloch is our talent expert. And if you're based in New South Wales, Queensland, ACT or Northern Territory, please feel free to reach out to Nikki. And for Dennis, who's located in Victoria, or if you're located in SA, WA or Tassie, please speak with Jennifer. Thank you once again. Remember to visit our website if you haven't read the report, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.